Andy Austin here, up in the attic, where it is absolutely pouring with rain outside, so there's no seagulls at the moment, but you may hear the gentle pitter-patter of the storm that's brewing outside on the roof tiles above my head. This chapter from The Rainbow Machine, Tales from a Neurolinguist's Journal by Andrew T. Austin, that's me, is the reframing chapter. It's time to pick on the NLPers again. Now, the example that I open this chapter with is my own personal one, which I know I've said before, but I'm going to say it again. When I was getting help for anxiety issues, I lost count of the number of people that said to me, well, you do know that anxiety is just excitement by a different name, and a little bit of excitement is good. Now, that is an example of a reframe, apparently, where we say, no, it's not this. We're going to take what you've said and repackage it as this and give it back to you. Therefore, the problem's gone away. It's no longer anxiety, it's merely excitement. And you, as in me, have mislabeled it. That kind of muppetry is absolutely endemic in the alphabet therapy scene, and especially amongst the NLP scene. And I don't think this is actually what reframing is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. But I think saying that, nope, what you said, it's not that, it's this, and your point of reference is incorrect, that's not really good reframing. And some people really ought to go back to the original textbooks or back to somebody who knows a little bit more and can train them a bit better. I think that might be a good move. As Bandler says, time for a refund. Although, who knows who some of these trainers are of some of these people. Maybe most of them don't have any trainers, they're just self-appointed. Now, one of the problems about reframing is it is also endemic absolutely everywhere. And I saw this a lot in psychiatry. A person who is diagnosed anorexic is never allowed to not be hungry, because what we now do is we can place a frame around their behavior about saying, I'm not hungry. And, of course, that's just symptoms of their anorexia. The schizophrenic who gets angry at a member of staff while they're just being schizophrenic. And this is R.D. Laing's non-person thing, where essentially once you are given a diagnostic label, your who you are, how you feel, your intentions are constantly reframed into the non-person. You become a schizophrenic. You become a depressive. And so now your agency, your locus of control, your attempt to offer interpretation to the world is actually taken away from you by the frames that are placed around you, and all your communication is reframed within that frame, which is the diagnostic label. This happens a lot. Now, at identity level, that's how that's operating. But at identity level, within families, within friendships, within workplaces, the same thing happens. Well, you know the kind of guy he is. Well, he's the sort of person who would. And so there's a social sabotaging that can go on in the backstabbing, say, workplace environment, where now we frame the person's behavior, we can pre-frame it. So by inducting new members of staff into a particular point of view of that member of staff, this is basically workplace bullying. Now what we can do is we give you a frame by which to interpret everything that that person does, which may or may not be correct. And so this is a lot how bullying works. And this is, I think guys do this more as well, but I think it's more often than not, this is a female social sabotaging approach. I saw this a lot in the hospital, where the backbiting and the bitching was done to sabotage people by placing a frame around that person preemptively, so that now other people interpreted their communication, and effectively their interpretation reframed it. This happens in families too. The black sheep of the family can be so labelled, and now everyone interprets everything they do as a potential risk. If they try and be self-employed, for example, they go off and do something that wouldn't be normal within the family. That's because they're a black sheep. Now, what this framing does, is that by labelling the other person and putting a frame around them so we can reinterpret everything that they do and say, we never have to address what we're doing. This is the classic, it's an extension of in-groups and out-groups. We are right by definition of how that person we have framed is behaving. These things are so common, it is everyday behavior. These are normal in human interactions. The problem is when it creeps into the therapy room. And when practitioners think that by using these frames, outframes, reframes, inframes, all these framing approaches that they get taught, they then deliver these things because they seem to think that somehow it's therapeutic, that somehow it's not anxiety, it's excitement that you experience. They think that somehow you're not angry, this is you being schizophrenic. They seem to think that's helpful. Now, the question we've got to ask is, who is it helpful for? It clearly isn't helpful for the person on the receiving end of that kind of nonsense. But it is helpful for us, the in-group of the peer group of NLP practitioners, the peer group of the mental health staff in an organization, the peer group of the socially dominant social group within the workplace. You know the type, they do the social evenings that you don't get invited to. That kind of scenario. Autobiographical. So when we are reframing, what we have to look at is what is the purpose of that and why are people doing it? And if you're an NLP practitioner has found yourself saying, well, you do know that anxiety is just excitement by a different name, you've got to question, what on earth are you doing and what was your purpose there? What was the benefit of that other than continuing in the position of being right, morally superior, intellectually superior, and having power over the other person? And, you know, I'm being an NLPer. And so, in part, some of these reframing behaviors are actually just little more than supportive of an identity role that the practitioner has assumed by virtue of attending a training course and having a certificate. And then that becomes their permission to talk to other people like that. Why do they think they're allowed to talk to other people like that? That's not a normal thing to be doing. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack with reframing. Bandler and Grinder's original book, which I know is actually, I say I know it is out of print. I think it's out of print. You can find it on eBay. It does tend to sell for quite big sums of money. Look on the second-hand bookstores on eBay, because you can find some bargains in there. All you have to do is find the stores and then go into the store and use the search function on that particular store. You'll be amazed at what you can pick up at bargain prices. It's quite an information-dense book. It's not the most entertaining of all the books, but if you're an NLPer and you haven't read it, you ought to read it. It is, I think, a quite an important set of principles, because hopefully we can put a stop to some of the absolute abject nonsense that is being put on paying clientele who with emotional mental health vulnerabilities, and they are being subjected to this kind of absolute tripe in the guise that this is therapeutic. As always, do please use the comment section below. Click that like button, it's always appreciated. There will be more little incoherent rants where somewhere there might be a thread of kind of meaning in there. We'll see what happens.